Hello everyone, Matt here. What I'm going to be doing now is turning really crappy looking old floorboards out of a loft into what will hopefully be a quite nice looking wooden bowl. Let's get started. Right, here's the floorboard I'll be using. It's pine, slightly damp, that doesn't matter, it's been out in the rain. It's got a couple of cracks in it, work around those. It's about 138 centimetres long. And I think I'm going to try and get a bowl about 8 inches wide out of this. First things first, a couple of screws. Gonna have to go. Can't be trying to bandsaw through screws. That will be no good for the bandsaw. No good for the blade anyway. They go in the bin. There's probably one at this end. And has to go as well. Right, let's do a little bit of marking. So we're going to go 20, actually I'm not going to mark this because I'm simply going to set something on my bandsaw. We're going to go about 23 centimetres, cut this into 23 centimetre chunks and then laminate them all together to form a bowl blank. So, over to the bandsaw. Right, got the fence on the bandsaw set to about 23 centimetres. Just going to do a whole load of cross cuts now. Let's put eye protection on. Right, my wood clearly has a split in it. You can see there. So I don't think I need that bit, it's just going to have to go. Right, less cutting to do now. Right, here's our stack of cut bits of wood. Now, some of them have flaws in them like that. Not particularly bothered about that because I need various different sizes of wood to laminate together to make a bowl anyway. A bowl has a profile, so the smaller bits of wood can go at the bottom. So that's okay. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Next thing to do is to find a rough centre for these things and use the bandsaw to take the corners off so that we get, you know, not accurate but rough circles. That just means that we don't have to do so much smashing the corners off the blank on the lathe, which is kind of tiresome. Right, this isn't rocket science, this does not have to be accurate. We are just going to go mark, mark. That will do for all of them. Use the convex side, it's ever so slightly easier. Done. Next step, scribe a circle on these things to give us a rough guide to cut around. Okay, right, back to the bandsaw. All we're going to do here is vaguely follow the contours of the circles we've scribed onto these things, turn them into roughly circular shaped pieces of wood. Right, that's done. Now, those of you who actually know how to set a bandsaw up properly will probably have noticed that my blade was going a bit wobbly there. I don't know why. The last blade I had on that bandsaw cut absolutely arrow straight, and that one there I just can't make it cut straight. Not sure why. Anyway, we did a tolerable job. This little one's clearly going on the bottom. I think these big ones are going to go in the middle, because I want the profile of the bowl to be something like that, if that makes sense. But before I glue all of these things together, 2 steps. Firstly, the surfaces need a bit of sanding. Now, they don't need to be made beautiful and flat or anything. I mean, these boards are sort of a bit bowed. But what they do need is just to have, I don't know, if they've got any kind of dirt or crap or whatever on them, you know, it'd be good to take that off to make sure the glue adheres properly. Screw up on my part. I should have done this when it was one big solid board, because it's easy to keep a big solid board steady and in one place while you're sanding it. I think when I try to sand these things individually with a random orbit sander, they're going to dance around all over the place and it's going to be annoying. Well, let's see what happens. Yeah, as I thought, they're trying to escape all over the place. Do I have a cloth to put one of these on? Okay, slightly unorthodox solution. Found a couple of old bits of this carpet gripper strip with these nasty sharp bits on it. Going to just pin them to the desk, and hopefully that will, once I place one of these things on there, it won't move around too much. If you do this, just be careful. This stuff is not only sharp and pointy; it's mean. Like it wants to stab you. It wants to hurt you. I don't know how they. I don't know how they imbued a building material with a malicious intent, but yeah, if you've used this stuff, you know what I'm talking about. Right, let's give this a go. Right, plenty good enough. It doesn't. Oh, it's left all these little holes in. That's not going to matter. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It's not a finished sanding. We just want to knock the surface off and expose a bit of bare wood that the glue should have a good chance of sticking to. So, on to all the others. Right, all done. These horrible things can go now. They're here to stay. There we go. Okay. Out of the way where they're not going to get me. So, the next step is gluing these things together. Before gluing them, I'm going to figure out the grain directions and how I want this stuff to be assembled, because once you put the glue in place, you know, you've got to be coordinating this, making sure it's right, putting clamps on it, you know, working to a bit of a time limit. That's not the time to try and figure out which bit goes where. So now is the time to do that. So that's clearly the base, right? We've got the end grain pointing upwards in a smile, so we'll try and keep, yeah, that makes sense because that's beveled there and that's beveled there, so we'll have it that way up, end grain pointing upwards like a smile, so we'll keep that consistent. And I want to change the direction of the grain in each layer, just like plywood. We're essentially going to make a 6-inch thick piece of plywood here and then turn a bowl from it. So that starts there. Let's see. Start this next one then. So end grain pointing upwards, and this time end grain facing that way. Where are we here? End grain pointing upwards, end grain facing to and fro this time. So that's that way, that's that way. Okay, next, end grain, where is it? There we go, pointing upwards, and this time going left to right. Next one, where's the end grain? There it is, pointing upwards, pointing forward and back. Final one on top. This one's smaller because the profile of this bowl will be that it turns in a little bit at the top. Right, end grain is like that. We want it pointing upwards and we want it going left to right. So that's my assembled blank. Before I do anything else, I'm going to mark on it where everything goes so that I'll remember. Yeah, I've chosen a crappy bit to mark on, well, whatever, get away with it. And 6. Okay, like that. So now we know exactly where to put things when we're gluing them. You can also see from here that these things do not fit together at all well. They're bowed in all sorts of directions. The clamping force is going to deal with that. The clamping force and the strength of the glue, I'll be using polyurethane adhesive. And when, of course, this is made into a bowl, a lot of that stress will be relieved by the fact that the entire interior will get hollowed out. So hopefully this will stay together on the lathe. If it doesn't, that will be amusing, I suppose. Right, ready to go. So, Gorilla Glue. I don't know if the Gorilla makes it stronger, but it's polyurethane adhesive. This bottle cost me 20 quid. I should have bought it online, but you know, I didn't time things correctly. G-clamps here so that I can clamp it all together. Bit of scrap wood to use as a glue spreader. Off we go. Okay, it's quite heavy. Right, I'm just trying to look at the glue joints and see if I can see any visible gaps. I think just for luck, I'm gonna give those all a bit more welly, just because. Right, so our blank has been drying overnight. Polyurethane glue foams up like this and makes all these foamy bits. That's not a problem, they're easy enough to snap off. So let's take the clamps off, see if it stays in one piece. Hopefully it will. Okay, there's the base of our bowl. Where's the bit where I drew the numbers on? It's kind of hidden under all this foamy stuff here. There's the top. Next step is drill a hole in there so we can get a screw chuck into it and we can get it onto the lathe. Now that we've got a hole in the centre of the blank, this is the top face of the bowl, we can stick this onto the screw chuck in the lathe, hold it against the jaws, and that will allow us to turn the outside profile of the bowl. Whilst doing that, we will turn a tenon onto the base, which can then be held in the jaws for hollowing the bowl out. Make sure that's on there nice and firmly. Okay. So it's time to do some finish cuts, try and get this surface as nice as possible so that we don't have to do an enormous amount of work with sandpaper. This is a shear scraper. It's a very big, heavy, solid thing which helps prevent it chattering. Nice sharp edge there, and that's going to just glide across the wood. You can see it taking some shavings off there. Take off a really fine layer and hopefully leave the grain in a good state so that we don't have to sand too much. Okay, time to do some sanding. The golden rule of sanding is go through all of the grits and don't try and skip any. You start with 60, 80, 100, 120, 180, 240, 400, 600 if you're using nice wood, which we're not today. You can go 60 and then you can go straight to 240, but you'll be sanding until you go blue in the face, trying to remove all the scratches. If you just go one grit at a time, everything turns out fine. The other thing that we have to do with wood like this is reverse the direction of sanding each time, because the grain is quite soft and hairy and it will kind of lay down and get combed down in a certain direction by the sandpaper. So going in the other direction when we do the next pass helps to actually take that grain off and leave a properly smooth surface. That was our 60 grit sanding. That one went on for quite a while. We were quite aggressive with that one because that's the one where you undo the minor defects, wrinkly bits, possibly even slightly out of shape bits that were left by the cutting process. So this is now looking and feeling quite nice. It's definitely the case that that way feels smoother than that way, and that's because that's the direction in which we sanded. So the grain is now kind of lying down. We need to, next pass, we're going to use 80 grit, we're going to go that way, and it will help take the take those little hairy bits of grain off, hopefully leave us with a nicer finish. Up to 180 grit now. And that was 400. So let's see if we can get a better angle on this. The surface is really very nice and smooth now. It's sort of borderline shiny. I can't feel any major defects in there, not that it really matters because this is a bit rough and ready, but looks good. The knots are behaving themselves quite well, which is nice. This tenon is, well, we'll see, but hopefully about right to be gripped by the chuck. The closer to the correct size it is, the less damage will be done by the jaws, because there'll be a nice sort of proper fit instead of the corners digging in or something. We've left the bottom nice and concave, because we want this thing to sit on the edge on a surface, not with the bottom, so it wobbles around. Okay, next step, turn it around, hollow it out. Well, shit. Apparently, the tenon is too small to be gripped in these jaws. I'm going to have to think of something. Well, that was slightly embarrassing. My by-eye judgment of the appropriate size of the tenon was obviously off. So the solution has been to wrap up a thin strip of paper until it's quite thick and bunched up, and pad that in between the tenon and the chuck jaws. It's not as crap as it sounds. In fact, it has the added bonus that we're going to preserve the outside finish on the tenon. The jaws won't leave any marks on it whatsoever. The only issue with it is keeping the bowl properly on centre, but I've done a little test here and the bowl actually rotates pretty well on centre. It's not perfect, it wouldn't be perfect by engineering standards, it's definitely good enough by wooden bowl standards. So, we can start hollowing. Okay, that feels about right. Right, the hollowing's done to the extent that we want to, remove wood and shape the inside of the bowl, but the inside surface is really rough because getting a nice sort of travelling sideways shear cut on the inside of a bowl like this is much tougher than doing it on the outside. So, enter the side cutting bowl scraper. Secret to using one of these is keep it above the centre line and keep it angled downwards. If this catches, if you angle this upwards and put it below the centre line and it catches, it will be forced downwards, which forces it harder into the side of the bowl, and you'll have a proper catch. Best case, it'll pull the tool out of your hand and be scary. Worst case, the bowl will smash to pieces. So this stays above the centre line and stays angled downwards, so that you have a negative rake, an effective negative rake above the tool, and the workpiece is pushing the tool away. Sanding the inside of the bowl is just like sanding the outside, only a bit more fiddly because the access is more limited. And it helps to have the drill going in the correct direction. Let's see. It feels okay. Slightly uneven, which isn't great. So we're going to go back in here with the scraper. The wall thickness is a little off there. That needs more off it. But I think the surface finish is okay, which is good, because that means we didn't tear the grain up so badly that we're going to need to sand it for literally hours or anything like that. So a little bit more scraping here to neaten the shape up. Right. Feels okay. Feels pretty good. Time for finishing. Right, so for finishing I'm using Libron finishing oil, which is it's a drying oil, so it contains catalysts which make it cure faster than the several weeks you would need for something like raw linseed oil. All we're going to do, brush it on, leave it to soak in for maybe 10 minutes, wipe the excess off, and then leave it for several hours. That's all you have to do per coat. Takes more than one coat to get a nice... Okay, let's not get a load of crap in there before we get the finish in. So there's a little bit in there, and all we do is spread it all over the bowl. Now, because pine is quite open-grained, porous stuff, what we're going to find is it greedily slurps the finish up, and we aren't going to get that lovely sort of wet look, shiny, varnished look all over the piece, certainly not on the first pass. That's okay. This just needs to soak in for a bit. We'll wipe the excess off so we don't get any lumpy, sticky messes on here, and then after about, well, 4 hours, but 12 is better. Indoors, that's why we're in the house now. We want warm environment so that this cures nice and quickly. After that, we will give it a very light denibbing with some probably 600, maybe 1000, maybe even 1500 grit silicon carbide paper, and then go at it again, another coat. For something like this, it's probably going to take 3 or 4 coats to be finished. Okay, a couple of coats of finishing oil and a nice buffing with some microcrystalline wax. This stuff, it's quite good stuff, and I think we're done. So it's come out quite well. It's nice, and it's got a dull satin finish, which I think is good. I actually don't want the sort of really glossy, shiny, plasticky look. I mean, this is made of an old floorboard after all, so I think satin's okay. You can kind of see the chatoyancy there, the way the end grain catches the light and changes colour as you sort of look around the thing, which I think is fairly nice. So with that, I believe this project is finished. Oh, one more thing. We have to test that it actually works, don't we? A bowl is a bowl. It's meant to store things. Here we go. Yep, it works.